Charlotte and the greater Charlotte region, and welcome to tonight's town hall titled Disaster Preparedness. Are we ready? Even though we're in the twilight of hurricane season, which ends on Tuesday, November the 30th, a whopping 20% of monster hurricanes have occurred in the month of October. Consider also that we're entering the winter months, the winter storm season, and weather officials have already announced the names for major winter storms. A heads up on tonight's discussion, while we'll be talking primarily about natural disasters, we'll also touch on man-made threats that could have disastrous consequences. So, we're here live and direct from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center with a distinguished panel of individuals from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Emergency Management, from Charlotte Water, Mecklenburg County, Duke Energy, and CMPD, and Charlotte Fire. So we're all here in the Government Center in the basement, and I got a full crew of expert individuals here to talk tonight about disaster preparedness. So we have a lot to cover, so let's get right down to it. So let's start with introductions from our panelists, each of whom will provide up to 3 minutes describing their respective roles in disaster preparedness. These introductory remarks will form the basis of what I hope will be a free-flowing discussion of critical information, questions and answers, and you are encouraged to put your questions in the chat so we can have a record of them, and if we can get to all of them, we will. If not, we'll have some response at a later date. So with that said, I'm going to start with, to my left over here, to Chief Johnson of the Charlotte Fire Department, just to introduce himself, say a few words, and we'll kick it off on around the room.
Thank you, Councilmember Phipps, for inviting us here and allowing me to speak. Again, Reginald Johnson, Fire Chief, Charlotte Fire Department, but I'm also the Executive Director over Charlotte-Mecklenburg Emergency Management Office, which does fall under the Charlotte Fire Department. And I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about that from Chief Graham as we continue to go around. But we're glad to be here to talk about disaster preparedness. That is one of the key functions of emergency management. And we're responsible for not only ensuring the Charlotte Fire Department is prepared to respond, but we're also responsible to make sure that the city, county, and towns are also ready to respond. And like I said, I'm sure Chief Graham will go into a little bit more detail there, but thank you for having us.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Chief Graham.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us. We love to talk about preparedness and emergency management. I serve as the Battalion Chief over Emergency Management and the Deputy Director of the division and oversee the day-to-day operations of our staff. Our internal staff's about 10, but we coordinate with about 1,000 people throughout the county in North Carolina Emergency Management, the Governor's Office, and of course the federal government and FEMA. We are unique in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County area because the city of Charlotte is responsible for emergency management for the entire county, and that falls underneath the Charlotte Fire Department. But I'll try not to hog everybody's time because I love this subject and I will talk about it all day long. So thank you.
All right, we look forward to it. Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Councilmember Phipps, and we are pleased to be a part of your crew. This evening, I am Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water. Our main responsibility is to make sure that we have water and wastewater services in our region. Now, in a disaster, we roll up through emergency management, and we're part of Public Works in the engineering section. Also, we are part of North Carolina Waterborne, where we're in a water response network across the state of North Carolina. We also have strategic partnerships like with Duke, Public Health, and other agencies to ensure that we are plugged in from a disaster response standpoint. Again, our main role is, and I've said it before, is to make sure that folks in our community can wash, brush, and flush appropriately during any type of disaster or incident that happens in our community.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Kanan.
Thank you very much. My name is Dave Kanan. I represent Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services, and Councilmember Phipps, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us here today. This is a very important discussion. Similar to other agencies, we're working on this when the skies are blue. In the context of today's discussion, I'll put it in 3 quick buckets. We're working before, during, and after the disaster. Before, we're encouraging folks to do things, simple things like clean off storm drains safely when they're covered with leaves. During the event, if it's a rainfall event, we're supporting the Charlotte Fire Department with our flood warning system. We have over 150 stream gauges and over 70 rainfall gauges. We have 10 cameras, and our role in that context and in that setting is to support those that are out there doing the great work that CFD does. And then as after the event is actually preparing for the next event, because the best way to prepare for the next event is to mitigate those losses from the ones you just incurred. So that may be assisting people elevate their homes and do other things, improve the storm drainage system so it reduces their risks in the future. Thanks again for having me here.
Thank you for coming. And we'll move over to Duke Energy over here, and Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Councilmember Phipps, for inviting Duke Energy to this important discussion. My name is Martha Wagner, and I'm the District Manager over Government and Community Relations. I work mostly issue management for our service area. I work closely in storms with Chief Graham in emergency management. We communicate with our meteorologists to talk about when winds may get high, when ice may accumulate such that power may come out. We know power is an important component of getting everyone's lives back to normal after an event, and we take that very seriously. Also, during high water events around the Catawba River, I do also work with Chief Graham and his team on communicating that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir. Appreciate the invite, Councilmember Phipps. I am Quinn Davis with Duke Energy. I'm the Director of Area Operations for one of 4 locations that serve the greater Charlotte area and the customers that we have there. My day-to-day responsibilities are ensuring the safe and reliable operation of the distribution system serving the Charlotte area. But during a storm, as Martha mentioned, we go into response mode of restoring any customers that do lose power. And my primary focus in those events are planning for the resource needs to restore power, as well as coordinating the operational efforts to restore power there as we work to restore all customers. So appreciate the invite, and look forward to the discussion tonight.
Great, thank you. And last but not least over here, we can hear from CMPD to see what their role is in disaster preparedness, and take it away over there.
My name is Captain Jonathan Thomas, representing CMPD. In disaster preparedness, we work extremely close with CFD and emergency management. They really are the best planners on that, but CMPD has some of the highest numbers of city employees. We're often the first on the scene for even some of the minor instances like this, just as a public service announcement to start this off. It's raining pretty hard tonight. What we would encounter a lot in this is when the roads start flooding and the people that think they can make it through that low-lying water, that creates a lot of issues very fast for us. That creates a lot of bad instances. So something like that, may be discussed tonight. That's where we first encounter it. Fire resources start coming, and all the entities in here tonight, that's where the first problems we'll see, and issues that we would encounter. I'm glad for the opportunity to be here and look forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, we're glad you're here. So one of the things I wanted to do to kick off this discussion is just to have I wanted to show a brief video of, we invited meteorologist Larry Sprinkle here, but his schedule is such that, he gets up early, but he did produce a video upon the, I guess, the 32nd anniversary of Hurricane Hugo. And this video is not but about a couple of minutes, but I thought it would be a good way. I don't know how many people were, I know I wasn't in Charlotte when Hurricane Hugo came through, but I understand it was quite a storm, and if we could roll that video, I would very much appreciate it.
30 years ago this fall, Hurricane Hugo set its sights on the Carolinas. It made landfall near Charleston as a Category 4 storm devastating the South Carolina coast. But as we know, the destruction didn't stop there. The storm kept its strength all the way inland. That includes the Charlotte area, where Hugo maintained Category 1 strength. The damage was nothing short of catastrophic. The day it hit, many of you turned to NBC Charlotte and Larry Sprinkle to find out the latest on Hugo. Now he's going to give you a look back at that storm that all storms are compared to.
September 1989. I remember it well, as does anyone else in the Carolinas who lived through Hurricane Hugo. That morning, we started seeing landfall in Charleston, near Charleston. We started to see that storm system moving farther inland. And we're looking at it on satellite going, this thing is now south of Charlotte. Hugo was a fast-moving hurricane, and by the time it hit uptown Charlotte, it was still close to a Category 1, with sustained winds nearly 70 miles per hour. To this day, Hugo ranks in the top 3 worst hurricanes to hit the United States, according to the Hurricane Severity Index. Boats were tossed, buildings destroyed, and the power was out for days, if not weeks. So I'm on the air talking about what's happening, and at some point I could hear over to the left-hand side of me some noises. All of a sudden there's this boom to my left. I looked over and I could see, out of the corner of my eye, I could see that the ceiling had caved in.
Gust up to about 100 miles an hour, Shaw Air Force Base. I've been distracted because, as a lot of people are experiencing, part of our ceiling just collapsed in here. This is a very serious system that is going through Charlotte.
And then I went, Rick Jackson, our news anchor, said, Rick, back to you. And so Rick says, Larry said the ceiling's caved in. Larry, let me ask you, Larry? And at that point, I was on my hands and knees as fast as I could crawl out of that studio. And he's going, Larry, we'll get back to Larry in just a few minutes. This huge transmission line that was connected to our tower, about 1,000-pound cable, snapped off, hit the roof, and pushed that into the ceiling of the studio, and it caved in right there in front of me. I really thought I was going to be the first weatherman to.
So yeah, so there you have it. I know, that was, I always hear about Hurricane Hugo, but never experienced it because I was up in Richmond, Virginia probably at the time. But I don't know how many of you all experienced it and can share some insights. I guess back 32 years ago, did we have an emergency management department? So it was in existence at that time.
Yes, sir.
So it was in full effect during that storm, right?
We've actually had an emergency management division since 1953.
Wow, okay.
So Mayor Van Every went to the county and said, we need civil defense. And the county said, we agree. And the city said, well, let's do 50-50. And the county said, let's do 60-40. So the city of Charlotte kind of took that over at that time.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. So now, okay, so that's a prime example then of a storm that was coming through. I don't know what kind of warning that you got. I thought at one time the warning was, well, it looks like it's going to veer away and, maybe not directly hit us, but sometime during the middle of the night, I guess it might have, I don't know, gained strength or changed course or something. But how did, I guess this collective group probably had a hand in responding to that Hurricane Hugo. So how did that whole thing materialize?
So in my understanding now, I was a junior in high school at the time.
Okay.
So it's been a while, but I have heard stories about it, and I believe back then the Emergency Operations Center was in the basement of I don't know if it's police headquarters. Maybe it was police headquarters.
Old City Hall, wasn't it?
Old City Hall,
Yeah.
And it was in the briefing room. And they had a box of telephones that they would break out and plug in, and so they went through that process. The thing to remember about any storm, any kind of hurricane, is one, we'll be prepared. As a, each person needs to take their own preparedness very seriously. But as a community, we're going to respond, and that response phase is actually fairly brief. And so it may last 12 hours, it may last a couple days. But then we get into what Dave was talking about, is recovery. And recovery from a hurricane can take up to 10 years. And when we talk about recovery, we're not only looking at how do we get folks back to where they were, whether it's their homes or their businesses or infrastructure, but also we have to study what went wrong during the storm, what flooded. And so then we get into hazard mitigation. So we're right off the get-go, we're going to start looking at what we can do to better prepare as a community for the next storm. And Angela, I think, just did some work on North Tryon underneath the bridge over there.
Right,
that
that's always
floods.
Water, yeah.
And I saw that, and I was so happy because
That's
it
one of the spots, huh?
floods all the time. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
Now,
that's a good example of hazard mitigation.
Yeah, now, I worked Hurricane Hugo. So I was a city employee. I worked on it was a frontline level, and my responsibility back at that time was to help clear the streets. I had never seen Charlotte like that. It was like we were demolished. There were trees and power lines down everywhere. And so my role was to go to Ott Street. The building is not there, and to be there at 2 o'clock. And when the winds started blowing, I went back in the back to see a couple of guys, and they had cuts all on their arms from the glass coming in from the storm. And we knew then this was something that we just hadn't seen before. The main objective was to get the critical functions up. Can we get people to the hospital to deal with emergency types of functions? Can we get employees in? If you weren't already in, when the storm hit, you had difficulty even getting to your work site. And I tell you what I've said. I was a city employee before Hugo. After Hugo is when I realized what public service was, because we worked 7 days a week for weeks to just try to get our community back up. And it says a lot, it really says a lot about Charlotte. I have said Charlotte is a resilient city because to go through Hugo, no power, no food. We ate emergency management. Thank God we had emergency. We ate emergency management sandwiches. That was the only meals that we had, because when we went home, we didn't have any power or anything to cook. So, but the city kept us going because we had to bring it back. It was really something to work with. And it impacted I'm 30 years later, but it really impacted me to see how we all had to come together as a city. And emergency management was very, very helpful in providing support to the folks who were out in the community trying to clear the streets and get everything done.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know that storm, and I guess for Duke Energy, power was out for multiple days, right? So what was that like?
Well, you lose track of days. You do lose track of days. You forget what day it is. You don't know when the last time you brushed your teeth. And I'll turn it over to Quinn for some particulars. But we also have the Florida service area. So many of us have gone and provided assistance to our teammates in Florida, and they do the same thing for us. So preparing for a storm, and we leave. We work the 16 hours a day and plus, and a lot of our employees leave their families at home with damages, with no roofs, and they can't go back. So Quinn, talk to us about what actually happens and how that works.
And similar to others, I was not in Charlotte at the time of Hurricane Hugo, but it certainly comes up. Every time we talk about a major storm impacting the city, we all hear at work about the references back to Hugo and how impactful it was to the city and to the line workers that restored power. And absolutely, as we're preparing for any major event, the first thing we try to communicate to all our employees is to take care of their family, get everything prepared for exactly what Martha's talking about. Because when we go into restoration mode, we do have to leave our families behind and take care of them as best we can, and work those long days, and sometimes come home to a home of our own without power. And we do that day in and day out until every home is restored. And it is a challenging time, but I tell you what, it is extremely rewarding to be a part of that city and that coming together and restoring our community, especially our emergency services. That is certainly near to our immediate needs as soon as a storm passes through, making sure emergency services and healthcare services can be restored as quickly as possible. So.
Wow. Okay.
Quinn mentioned something that I think was important too when you talk about emergency response and disasters. We had employees with issues at home, like you said, trees on houses, no power, just all types of situations. But the employees put that was secondary. What became primary was bringing the city of Charlotte back up. And I remember a meeting, I've been looking for this picture in particular, where the city manager at that time was Wendell White. And he came out and our employees was asking him, can we get one day where we can go and take care of what's going on at home? That's how impactful, that's how widespread Hugo was. And I don't want that to get lost in the story. When you're working a disaster, is when you make the decision as an individual to put that disaster first.
Right.
And what's going on at home in the community sometimes is secondary.
Wow.
And your own, yeah. That disaster in the community is first, and what's going on with you
Yeah.
is secondary, yeah.
Mr. Grant?
I want to make sure that everybody understands that while it was, back in 1989, if it's happened in the past, there's a 100% chance it'll happen in the future. So we don't know when the next Hugo is going to hit Charlotte, but we know that a Hugo has come through Charlotte. And so therefore, in the future, at some point, it'll happen again. And if we look back in North Carolina history, none of us are old enough to remember this, but my grandmother used to tell me about it. The floods of 1916 and the floods of 1940, and then we had Ivan and Francis, which was in my career. So the busiest day of the and I left my wife at home with a newborn, and I have not heard the end of that ever since. But I remember coming to work, and you could see all of the transformers popping off, and you would have thought we were in the middle of a thunderstorm. It was just, looked like lightning popping off, and listening to John Hancock on WBT radio as I was coming in. And that was the busiest day the Charlotte Fire Department's ever had. We ran over 1,000 calls that day. And everybody, I walked into Fire Station 3, and the rescue company and the engine company were laying on the floor of the day room in their turnout gear, because we could do that back then. But they were all laying around, and they were just defeated because they had been up all night fighting fire and those things. So it does, we go through this, and we go through it with thunderstorms. We can get really busy. So
it's just not, this was an extreme event, but we've had other events that really taxed our community in terms of disastrous results. So already, I'm going to come back to CMPD to see what their role was in during that time, and did they? I don't know if many people were out and about during the storm, or if you had to control for any kind of nefarious activities like looting potential or whatever. But before we do that, we do have we're beginning to get already some questions from the chat, and we got one good question that says, over the last few years, we've felt the impacts of minor earthquakes. And the question is this area becoming more at risk for a major earthquake event?
Miss Charles, Director Charles, I call her Angela, but anyway.
You call me
So Sunday morning last year, actually, I can tell this story. This is a good story. So the day before, we went up to Cashiers, North Carolina for my honeymoon. And I was with my wife, and we were going up to Highlands, and a bobcat ran out in front of us and stopped. And I said, good gracious, it's a bobcat. And when we were coming back, there were 2 feral pigs around the side of the road, and I was like, man, I can't believe, there's a lot of active wildlife. Now, I say that because the last time we had an earthquake, I was in Hendersonville, and there was a bear sitting on the side of the road when I pulled in, and I thought, what is going on? That was the day they had the earthquake in D.C. So, Angela, Sunday morning, my wife had gone to the hospital to go to work, and the phone rang, and I got a phone call from Angela. She says, Wyke, what is going on? And I said, I don't know. She said it's shaking, and so we looked into it with the U.S. Geological Survey. There was a very significant earthquake in Charleston in the late 1800s. I can't remember the exact year, but it is a well-known case study in emergency management. And my great Aunt Josie, who lived to be 112, talked about when she was a child, stories and how they had to sleep out in the field up in Rowan County after the earthquake. And you can still go around Charlotte, and we have a few buildings that have the tie rods like you'll see in Charleston, and that's from that time when they had that earthquake. Now, we are not more active, but we also pay more attention. And of course, it's always worse when you're there. And so when we talk about 2020, 2021, we do keep an eye on that, and that is one of the things that we are concerned about. But you can't predict earthquakes. Well, I've been told. And so we do keep an eye. But the one in Charleston that occurred, no one knew it happened. So when that happened, they had no idea how bad things were in Charleston, because back then the communication didn't flow. So it took several days to find out exactly how bad it was, and it was devastating.
Great, all right. So, okay, getting back, before we get to the next question that's on the chat, I wanted to get CMPD's perspective to see, okay, in a lot, in these, we have, like, even Hugo, I don't know, was that more of a wind event or a wind and a rain event? Did we have much flooding?
Hugo was more of a wind event than a flooding event. The most rain that North Carolina has ever recorded was in 1940 on top of Grandfather Mountain. It was 27 inches in a 24-hour period. The rain that we had from Tropical Storm Fred just a few months ago in Haywood County, I'm trying to remember exactly how much they got, but it was something like 17, 18 inches in a very brief period of time. And we were there, Charlotte firefighters were there to assist. And then also in Lake Toxaway. So there is a difference. Sometimes you'll get more flooding than you will get more wind. When we had Hurricane Florence, we if you recall, we were activated at the Emergency Operations Center for 7 days, and the entire state was impacted, and we had a flood emergency. And when you have a flash flood emergency, they call emergency. National Weather Service at Greenville will call us, and we'll talk about what conditions we're seeing on the ground currently. And so we issued a flash flood emergency for Mecklenburg County in coordination with emergency management. And we set off the iPods, which sets off all the phones in the county. If you recall, it was very serious. They said we're going to get more rain, we think, in a 24-hour period than you've ever gotten in recorded history of Mecklenburg County. And there were some areas of the county out near Matthews that did. If you recall, there were a couple deaths in Union County at the same time. So we set off the iPods in the middle of the Panthers game, and I apologize for that. But Hurricane Michael, which was that same year, was later in that year. If you remember that day, we got a lot of wind, and that was later in the season, so the storms tend to go really fast later in the season. So it was a quick hit. We activated the Emergency Operations Center that morning about 6 a.m., and by that night at 6 p.m., we were done, and we were back home, but we had more calls for service and more damage, wind damage in Charlotte that day than we did during Florence. So it's just kind of, you can have both, or you can have one or the other.
Wow, okay. And CMPD's role is mainly what, helping coordinating rescue efforts or?
We'll assist firefight. They're the main structure rescue.
Uh-huh.
We'll have, we roll up on various wrecks and everything. During Hugo, I wasn't around there neither. I was probably a year behind Chief Graham in school, at least. But the officers that I've talked to, they remember the same thing, working maybe 2 weeks straight. One of the biggest roles, it sounds like nothing, but every single major intersection was manned by police officers and women, 24/7. Every major intersection in the county had to be, because all the traffic lights were out for at least 10 days from what I heard.
Yeah.
Wow.
With the size of the department then was approximately maybe 1,000 officers. The same thing as Charles said, no days off, 12-hour shifts, you're not going home. That's the stories I heard from the officers at the time. In my history, one of the ones, and it was one of the best recollections I have of working really closely with emergency management and seeing the rescue efforts that CFD can bring forth. I think it was 2012, and this shows how all these events can happen when we're in the middle of something else that's a big pull. It was the CIAA. And we had a string of very bad thunderstorms that turned into tornadoes out off of Reedy Creek Road.
Oh, okay.
There were a solid 4 neighborhoods that were almost completely demolished.
I remember that.
And we went from working 12-hour shifts, heavy manpower pulls or staffing pulls at the CIAA. It came through at like 2 a.m., right when we were getting ready to demobilize from CIAA, I think that Friday night, into assisting CFD search and rescue for I think a few square miles that were due to several tornadoes. I mean, the entire neighborhoods were down, and we were teaming up with CFD, and they were going house to house. You had all the power was out, you had gas lines ruptured, and we didn't know if people were in those houses. And that was one of the first times I think I'd worked a 36-hour day alongside CFD, but that just goes to show the planning. You're already having a major event, extra 40,000 people in town, and then that happens, and we handled it, and we did it well. So with the preparedness and the planning that we have, with the expertise in this room, it shows what we can do.
Yeah, I think one of the things to remember, oh, by the way, I lived one neighborhood away from where one of those tornadoes touched down. I got out on 485, and I was like, what is all this pink stuff on 485? What's the insulation from the attics of the individuals' roofs and the homes? It was terrible. But to that point, a lot of our, like 95 flood, 97 flood, the 08, those were isolated storms, or they were remnants of tropical storms. And so sometimes we're predicting hurricanes and things like that. That's actually somewhat better for stormwater. It's the ones that keep me up at night that aren't predictable. Right. They're the storm cells that sit over a part of Charlotte and just rain intensely and just don't seem to go away. And it may not impact the whole county, but if it floods 15 individuals' homes, that's a disaster to those 15 individuals. Yeah. And that's where we all come together and as good public servants, as Angela said, and help them through that. But most importantly, prepare for the next one.
Right. Okay. Good. And I guess even Duke Energy, I know. Now, I didn't realize that Duke Energy had its own weather meteorologist and looking. Do y'all have like Doppler radar and everything too?
Oh, absolutely. We have a team of meteorologists, and that is their primary job every day. And so not only in major storm preparations, but every day they are evaluating the weather impacts, looking out at the forecast, and communicating to us in the operations as to what to be on the lookout for. And not only are they trying to predict the weather, which I can't even begin to understand how that takes place, but they're trying to interpret how it's going to impact our system in all the cities that we serve across the Carolinas, the Midwest, and the Florida. So they're taking a look at all the radar, taking a look at all the information, and evaluating the impacts on our customers. And so it's marrying up both of those things, and we try to respond as best we can with that.
Great, great. We're going to go to another question from the chat, because we still have several questions coming in. And this probably is a sensitive question, and I know we spoke beforehand during our preparation meeting about certain things that we wouldn't be able to talk about in depth. But this question, it says, the city and other agencies seem well prepared for typical disasters such as hurricanes and flooding. but are the agencies preparing for disasters that we may not expect, such as a nuclear event? Which, how should residents prepare for such a disaster? Now, I know, we could only talk maybe very high level of that, and I think it gets into a point for Mr. Graham in terms of, being the emergency management for the whole county. We're not only looking at natural disasters, but we're looking at other threats and things that might come our way that would precipitate disasters. So, apart from the traditional disasters like the natural ones, I know emergency management looks at other things too, being the primary authority over emergency management for the whole county. Is that not true?
Correct. So we have a term in emergency management, and it says failure to imagine. So we look at everything, any kind of hazards. 95% of what we're going to actually deal with are weather related. 5% of other things. And one of those 5% are pandemics. And so the list, I got Face ID, so it's not going to work right. I want to make sure I read this for you. But in general, we focus on fires, explosions, natural hazards, which we're talking about some tonight, terrorism, workplace violence, pandemics, cyber attacks, civil unrest, radiological emergencies, mass casualty incidents, and our office was created primarily to deal with nuclear war. So we look at all those things, and we work with everybody. We work with everybody from the military to FBI to CMPD, Department of Homeland Security, CISA, which is the cybersecurity folks. We're involved. When does emergency management really activate the Emergency Operations Center and start to put things in place? Depending on the magnitude, high visibility, an unusual location, high impact, a unique threat agent, surprise, eligibility for disaster declaration, or multiple jurisdictional authorities that are involved. And there's really 5 phases that we deal with. One is prevention. The next one is planning or preparation. I'll talk a little bit about that tonight. Response, mitigation, and recovery. Mitigation is what can we do to keep it from happening the next time, and then recovery. And so there's these different phases that we're always in, one or the other. Everybody in here is really part of the emergency management program. CMPD are key to what we do. And so we have, I was sitting here trying to think about it, a lieutenant, a captain, a major, a deputy chief, and then Chief Jennings. And they all know what emergency management is. They all answer the phone. And we have the great and unique responsibility that we work for the city of Charlotte, but we also work for the county and then the other 6 towns, and then of course the state. And if you think about it, they have a thing in emergency management, they say emergency management is federally funded, right, through FEMA. It's state managed through North Carolina Emergency Management, and it's locally executed. All disasters start and end locally, and so that's where we really come into play. But from the mayor on down, when we have to have an emergency declaration, the mayor signs off on it, county commissioners sign off on it. So we know where all these folks are, and so everybody kind of knows that, hey, emergency management might be looking for you, and a lot of times we'll give a heads up, hey, we need to know where Mayor Lyles is going to be today, and she knows what we're looking for, so very important.
And if I could, Councilmember Phipps, just throw in there, we have a very good working relationship with Duke Energy. Obviously, we're sandwiched in between 2 nuclear power plants, and we train all the time when it comes to that response. Tabletops, actual preparation. And so we are well prepared to specifically answer the question about nuclear or radiological. We are well prepared to respond to that as a region, just even outside the city and the county itself.
And if I may, as part of that training, other federal agencies come in and monitor the effectiveness of your training, and so it's not like done in isolation. So there's a lot of oversight to just double check and ensure the right things are getting done. One of the most interesting phone calls I got was from the ice storm, previous emergency management director, and I said, "It didn't flood." He goes, "Yeah, but you got resources and know how to operate chainsaws." Time to go. Yes, sir.
You need all hands on deck, right? Yeah. And Chief Graham, one of the questions we got here was a response to your comment about the emergency management prepares for pandemics. And the question is, what is the most important lesson that you learned in this agency's response to COVID-19?
Oh, we'll be talking about the pandemic for a long time. I would say the most important lesson is one that I felt like I understood before, but I really understand now, probably even deeper, is that personal relationships matter. And all the folks in this room, but like I said, there's about 1,000 of them. Gibby Harris and I had a relationship before the pandemic. She was actually in the Emergency Operations Center for Hurricane Florence. And we did a course. It's a capstone course. It's a high-level course through FEMA called the Integrated Emergency Management Course. And we did it in January of last year, and it was in preparation for the Republican National Convention. So we really pushed hard to get this course brought to Charlotte, and all the instructors came in. And so we had all the right people there, and Gibby was there, and we were talking about things that were happening in China. We were actually monitoring that in November of the year before, so we've been talking about it. And so when she called me, and she said, "Wyke, I think we need the Emergency Operations Center." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Let me make a phone call." And I called Chief Johnson, and I was actually out of town. And so I flew back to Charlotte. I've got a picture of it, because North Carolina Emergency Management came in, and I was wearing blue jeans and a T-shirt sitting in my office with Hannah and Chief Johnson and North Carolina Emergency Management when they told us, "Hey, we think this is going to be pretty significant." But Gibby and I sat next to each other for many, many months, and I can pick up the phone right now. The county manager's ability to really jump in and offer the county services, and then Mr. Jones's ability, because we met with him. That was one of the first people we met with, and he was fully on board with what we needed to do. So everybody moved quickly, but really coming together as a team and understanding that we were going to have to take care of Charlotte. And one of the things about the pandemic, especially in the early days, emergency management or anybody else, if you recall, there were not outside resources we could call upon. So usually in the weather, we have all these outside resources that come in. The early months of the pandemic, several months, Mecklenburg County had to deal with Mecklenburg County, and there wasn't anybody we could call. So we were trying to find solutions for our community here, and it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy. And I'll probably need to go see a counselor or something at some point. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. Now, I know on my time on council that I remember receiving a binder. I don't know, it was the hazmat emergency preparedness plan or whatever it was, but is the city's disaster response plan documented anywhere, or is it a regional plan, or does each individual municipality have to, even though you have this overarching plan, do they have to formulate their own? Like, does Matthews have to have a plan, Mint Hill, Charlotte, or is it just a global plan?
So we have one plan for Mecklenburg County, and in 2017 we sat down and said we need to revisit that plan. We do it every 5 years. And in 2018, we spent a significant amount of time revamping our what they call emergency operations plan. And then there's annexes that go into that plan. In 2019, Hannah and I and the fire chief, and we went to all 8 of our governments in Mecklenburg County, all the councils and the commissions, and we presented the plan. And what we asked for was each one of those councils or commissions voted to give their chief elected official the authority to sign off on it. And so the emergency operations plan, it's signed off by all the key elected officials in Mecklenburg County. And because of that, then that flows into North Carolina General Statute 166A, which is the emergency management statute, and all the way up and down. So it is, I've been told it's a very good plan, not because we wrote it, but because other people have told us that it's a very good plan.
So is that plan available for like public review, inspection? Is it on the website or anything? Or?
We don't put it on a website because it does deal with some security issues.
Okay.
But if the public wants to see it, they can come to our office, and we'll actually allow them to read the plan, and then we just kind of keep up with who's actually seeing the plan. It does change, and so when we have an incident like a pandemic, there's annexes for each one of these threats and hazards. We'll revisit that. We'll do an after-action report and look at it and say, what do we need to do to make the plan better for the next time?
Great. So I hope that answers the question there. And I know this particular question that's coming up, and I think that Duke Energy actually had prepared or given us beforehand like a Cliff Notes cheat sheet on what we should be, how we should prepare before the storm and after the storm. But this question is, what disaster preparedness items should I have ready in my home or in my car? So that's a pretty broad one, and I don't know if it's a good time for you to share what people should be looking for or preparing for major storms coming through when they get that alert, how they should, what things that they should do. It's being queued up here now.
But I don't have in the car on there, but the things that we tell our employees are, have a blanket, have a knife, have a snack bar. If you're going somewhere and you don't know how long you might be, you might get stuck somewhere, especially in snowstorms or things, have some bottled water, have a snack, have a blanket, have your phone charged and know where it's going to be. And have someone know where you are. I know it sounds simplistic because we all have cell phones now, but letting somebody know what path you're going to be taking. I'm going to be on 85 or 77. But I've got a list here, and you can look at that, and we can make that available. But before the storm, supply kit, do it now before you need to start looking for it. And you should really always have that for any kind of event. And I'm sure our emergency management folks can add to this, but everything your family is going to need for maybe at least 2 weeks, because we've talked about some of these things aren't easy to come to recover from. Your medicine, your water, non-perishable foods, other supplies that might be hard to find during a storm, baby supplies, diapers, formula, things that you might need. Keep a portable radio or a TV or a NOAA radio on hand so you can monitor the weather forecast. Our cell phones now let you know, but these are things that you should have too to prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Charge your cell phone.
Yeah.
And computers and all your electronic devices, that's what we depend on. And we tell our folks, buy those chargers, those extra chargers, have them fully charged so that when your phone goes dead, you can plug those back in because you may not be able to get anything. And maintain a plan to move family members. We hear so often during disasters that someone's has special needs or someone's had surgery. Make plans for those people in your family for an alternate location if you have a power outage or if you have to be evacuated. Reviewing your insurance policies, have extra copies, preferably in something that's waterproof, so that you can have important documents and in your emergency supply kit. And if you have pets, make sure that the evacuation shelters that you're looking at accept pets, or you have friends or family members. That's before the storm. So I think we also have something after the storm.
Yeah.
Stay away from power lines that are falling in or sagging. I've worked with a company for a long time. I can't tell if a power line is energized or not unless I see both ends. So consider they're all energized, as well as stay away from trees or limbs, anything that's come in contact that maybe have energized lines with it. This one I'm not going to go into. If a power line falls across your car, try to stay in the car. And if you must, try to jump out. But I'm going to say most of the time, just try to stay in the car till the professionals get there. Follow the CDC guidelines if you have to go to an emergency shelter. And there's some documents there. There's some more duke-energy.com/storm tips.
Great. All right. I have one of those NOAA weather radios, and those things are excellent pieces of equipment to have. I mean, it might get monotonous all the time when they, but they can track the storm, telling you what time it's going to be in your area. I mean, that's money. I mean, you can get them for like less than $50 or something. I mean,
you can.
that's a good piece of equipment, and then it can run. You can either plug it in or it can be battery operated.
And
but-
some are solar as
yeah,
well.
Yeah, but we have one question. When you were making that presentation on tips there, we got one question. This person says, I have a disability. Is there any special emergency or disaster planning I should do?
Well, as far as being without electricity, if the disability requires you to be on oxygen or something that's dependent upon electricity, you should honestly always have a plan B. So if that's going somewhere else, having portable oxygen tanks, making sure that you have your supply to take care of that. If you're in an apartment complex that requires you to get in an elevator to get down, you should have alternate plans for that. Maybe there's people that you can contact or be with. It's always better to be in a situation before a storm hits that makes sure your life is able to be taken care of and that you don't put yourself in that situation. And I'm sure there's other things that.
Right, definitely. Mr.
I
Grant,
do want to point out, one of the things that we worry about is people who have medical issues that live on like the second or third floor and rely on that elevator. Those are mitigation efforts that you can take in advance. So you want to make sure that if you can be on the first floor, you do that. Second part of that, fire chief, we're sitting here listening to this, and I know that when we have large scale power outages, especially in the wintertime, carbon monoxide is a killer, right? My parents almost died during Hurricane Francis from carbon monoxide. And it was a very odd situation, but luckily identified that they were running a generator outside, but it was pushing all the CO inside. So we want people to have carbon monoxide. We want to make sure they're not using alternative heating sources like turkey fryers and charcoal grills and all the things that we've seen that really cause a problem. And so we don't want you to die after a storm, right? And so that's one of the big things. Chainsaw safety is a big one. Staying away from power lines. But there are things, some of them seem like common sense, but when you've got a lot going on, that'll catch you off guard. The other thing, this is not just something that's storm related. We just had a major outage of the Colonial Pipeline, and so we think in terms that this can happen all the time. We can have major cyber attacks against the U.S. and I don't know how much cash I have in my wallet, and I'll see my kids this weekend, so I won't have any. But, I use these really to buy everything, right? And so the phones and your computers tell you how much money you have in your account. But we don't see how much money we have anymore. We don't see our account. It's just a number on a screen. What happens when you can't access that? And so there are some common sense things. We don't like people to use candles. We like them to try to use flashlights. Solar power is a great example of some things. They sell these wonderful solar kits you can put out there. We've got, I know Hannah's got one, I've got one. We got these flashlight lanterns that have a solar top, and you sit those out, you just blow them up, and so they're great. And so there's a lot of things you can do. I know the fire chief probably wants to win because from a community risk reduction, anytime we have an ice storm, major storm is when we have, unfortunately, we have accidents.
right. CMPD, okay.
We start seeing an increase on day 3, or it was one of the ice storms we had, I think it was 2013, that everything was closed up. Grocery stores were closed for at least 2 to 4 days. Our 911 centers were getting calls on about the 3rd day. People couldn't get food. They were used to day-by-day food. McDonald's wasn't open, just stuff like that. They couldn't feed their kids. Even some simple items. People don't own hand-cranked can openers. They have electric can openers. They may have had cans of food, but they didn't have anything they knew how to open them with. Little things like that for preparedness. But 911, unless it's an extenuating circumstance, like I said, we started getting calls for, hey, I don't have food for my family. And we do have some resources that we can point them towards, but it is disheartening when that does start to happen. And it seems like the 3-day mark of normal resources being having issues, that we start to see a great increase in that.
And those are just some things that I know we talked about your preparedness kit, right? And I'm glad that Chief Graham brought up money, right? Because when you're in your third, fifth day and all the power's still out, but you need to purchase a few things, cash may be the only way that you can do that. And so you're not going to be able to go to the ATM if there's no power. So keeping some money at home. I think the can opener is a perfect example of part of that kit. Food that you can eat right now that you can access, whether it's, snack bars or things of that nature that you want to make sure that you have in that kit.
Now, I know in my reading about this whole topic, flooding is the most common and most expensive natural disaster that we face in the U.S. according to FEMA. And they say like 90% of all natural disasters in the U.S. involve flooding, and just 1 inch of water can cause about $25,000 in damage to a home. And we got a question here that's talking about, during weather events, aging, dying trees create the potential for a disaster. They want to know, what is the city doing about the aging tree canopy to reduce the likelihood of large trees falling? Now, I thought of everybody to invite to this meeting, but I didn't invite Trees Charlotte, So I know that anytime you get a saturated ground, and even, moderate winds can affect even healthy trees from toppling over. But I know street trees are being looked at all the time by the city arborist in terms of trimming and removing those kinds of trees. But so many trees are on private property or whatever. But one of the things I always was curious about is when you get these weather systems that hover over an area and dump large amounts of rain, is there any modeling that's done to predict how much capacity we can absorb without major flooding? I mean, I know we got streams all around Charlotte, and I know we got a lot of stormwater basins and everything, but you look at some of these flooding areas, other parts of the country, it's like, did they have anything? I mean, because it looks like just a river of water all on top of cars or anything. I mean, how can you prepare for something like that? I know if you're in a floodplain zone, you can go on site and put your address in and see if your property is in a floodplain. But what I've been reading is if we get some rain, even if you're not in the floodplain, it's a high probability that your house will still flood. So do we do any kind of modeling about potential rain? Somebody mentioned 24 inches in a short period of time. Do we do it, or we just say, well, it's going to come and we just have to deal with it, once it stops or something?
So, very good question. Thank you for that. In our floodplains, yes, we have a lot of modeling. We actually just completed a 3-year partnership with Homeland Security, and they granted us just short of $1 million to improve that modeling and actually be able to do futuristic and predictive modeling. So then we can advise Charlotte Fire Department, hey, I think you might want to send a unit to go at this road crossing because the road's going to be underwater in an hour. Currently, we'd have to wait for that phone call. It may be a CMPD police officer or it could be a resident. Or unfortunately, it could be a stranded motorist who's called 911, and that's how we find out the road's underwater. And that's where we don't want to be, but unfortunately, with all the inlets and all the pipes and all the creeks that we have, that's a real possibility. So the best way to mitigate that and minimize that lies in the hands of the driver. They literally, it's the time that they can take risk mitigation, risk reduction, and make the right decision and turn around. Now, they may be a little bit late to wherever they're going, but they're going to be a whole lot of late if they have to be rescued.
Right.
And they're putting other people, even though they're very skilled in what they do, our swiftwater rescue teams, it's putting them at risk also. So back to your modeling question, yes, we do that on in the floodplain and even upstream. And so when we have a large number of citizens' requests for flooding in what we call more of our infrastructure or up in the watershed, then the stormwater program will go into that watershed or that neighborhood and make pipes bigger and get the culvert underneath the road to operate more efficiently and reduce that flood loss. Over the last 20 years in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, over 700 families have been removed from the floodplain. We've almost, just short of 200 acres of open space have been returned to trees and greenways and things like that. We're closing in on 500 buildings, commercial and residential, that have been removed from the floodplain. An interesting note, somebody mentioned the November flood. Mm-hmm. That's the first flood that we've encountered where we avoided more losses than we incurred. So think about that. So because of the stormwater management program, extreme support from city county leadership, there was more people that didn't have to go through the experience of flooding that did, because of the last 25 plus years of intense investment into our storm drainage system. So yes, we model it, but at the end of the day, really, especially if you're a driver, the best decision, doesn't matter what all those fancy dancy computer thingies say.
Right.
You're driving the car, just turn around, take a little bit longer route, and you'll get there safe.
Great. Wow. Okay. And I recall when you're talking about removing, returning open space to floodplains, that it was, at least I remember several years ago, 16 homes in the Hidden Valley area were purchased, and now they have an ecological garden out there now.
Yeah.
So that program is still in effect, where we see these houses and structures that are prone to flooding, that we would absorb the cost and getting those houses out of the floodplain and just keeping it open.
Yeah, yes, sir. When we started the floodplain buyout program in 2000, there was 6 neighborhoods that we started in, and that was one of them. Another one was behind Park Road Shopping Center. There are several more. There was a small neighborhood off of Andrew Terrace that was about maybe 14 homes, and we bought all the homes and removed them. We planted trees, and we have taken up the road. Now, literally, the trees have grown so big, and it's now a mature forest, that we don't even have to mow the ground anymore. So all that is doing all the right things for air quality. It's doing all the right things for water quality. That's where our floodplains need to be. They need to be in that natural state.
And I know, Ms. Charles, just recently, other than just a natural disaster, I guess you can have water main breaks that result in natural disasters so that we experienced maybe a week ago, that had a large swath of the city having to boil water. So anything can pop up. I mean, you name it. I mean, something can cause you all guys to get in action and come together to meet that challenge. So we're certainly appreciative of that. Now, one of the things that in my reading, I see here where Charlotte is in the top 1% of cities nationwide for its flood risk mitigation. Do you all know anything about that? I mean, they received a special designation from FEMA because of the work that I guess y'all have been doing in flood mitigation, that residents can receive, I guess, up to 35% discount on flood insurance if they qualify and, get it within the 30-day grace period or whatever. So I was wondering, I saw that article, and it seems like it was some good news for Charlotte.
Yes, absolutely. October 1st, that 35%, it was 30%. It went up 5% more. And it is because of that continued investment. We love the word investment because that's what we're doing with the public's money.
Right.
We are investing in making ourselves more of a resilient community. That's a fancy word for being able to rebound a lot faster.
Definitely.
And to recognize that, the residents with flood insurance in Charlotte get a 35% discount on their flood insurance premiums. And it's FEMA's way through the National Flood Insurance Program to say, y'all are going above and beyond, and you're reducing the risk that the federal government's going to have to pay out on the claim. So because of that above and beyond work that y'all are doing and the investments that you are making, we're going to reduce the premiums in your community. So Charlotte is the most populous municipality in the United States with that high of a discount. Nobody else has it.
Wow.
And if they do, as a municipality, they have a smaller population. And there's I think 4,000 communities that participate, and there's maybe 6 or 7 at a class rating that we are, or higher.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's quite an accomplishment. And
Yeah, that is good news for Charlotte. I mean, you know, that should be something that's highlighted more. I mean, that's worthy of getting the word out on that. That's for sure. All right. Do we have any more questions from the chat? Okay.
But that's for you first before we take the next question.
Okay.
And it's on the screen right now if you want to mention it.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically, it says a great resource for our residents to visit to learn more about emergency preparedness. I think we should probably, as a part of this town hall, even afterwards, if we can have a media advisory listing the different websites and things that the public might be able to access as a result of what we've talked about tonight. So that's one of the things that we're going to make sure that we push out to the community. I know we got the tips from Duke Energy. We want to get those out there, and they probably would have their contact information and website address for certain things. But any other worthy pieces of information accessible through the web that we can get on that sheet and push out would be something that we want to do as part of the postscript to after, when we finish this particular town hall. So did you have something you wanted to say?
We
Okay.
want to make sure two things. One, Dave Keenan and Director Charles, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we have our mitigation efforts here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County are really industry best practices. And so and you hit on it, we don't talk about it because it's not they've done such a great job that you don't talk about, hey, they were able to not have an emergency or not have flooding or, so we get asked all the time. We had a meeting just a few months ago with Harris County, which is Houston, and Houston wanted to know what we were doing in Charlotte that was so right. And so that you just really can't overemphasize the work that goes on through our hazard mitigation plans, which are done every 5 years. And FEMA has a new program called the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or the BRIC program, which actually provides money every year. And that's a new program that we're just now getting into. But the second part of that is we have our opt-in notification system is called CharMec Alerts. And CharMec Alerts, we say it every time we meet, but not everybody picks up on it. It is so important that people opt into that program. We have two ways of contacting you. One, we have iPods. We can set all the phones off. We very rarely do that. That's the presidential system, and that's got to be a major, major, major emergency. But the CharMec Alerts is so important for you to go to that website and to opt in, because you can get important information on weather, but you can also get you can sign up for weather alerts. And so when the National Weather Service sends out information, you'll get an alert immediately to your phone based on your location. You'd love that because if you're out and about like we are on the weekends or doing things, your phone will pop up and tell you got a severe thunderstorm warning coming in. As we all know, this can happen very quickly, so definitely recommend everybody sign up for that.
Definitely. That's the kind of information we want to get on this sheet so people can opt in to get that information so they can be plugged in almost instantaneously when an alert comes. Okay, so we have another question from the chat, a really important question in the times we're living in right now. The question is climate change beginning to impact how the city prepares for natural disasters?
Yes. So, in emergency management, climate change, we don't debate why it's happening. We don't get into, is it, cyclical? Are we going through a different period? Is it human-made or human-caused, or what is going on? But we do know that climate change is something that we're worried about. And Brad Panovich I saw a tweet yesterday talking about our averages, our temperature averages and our snowfall averages over the last 10 years and the 10 years before that and going back to the 40s and 50s. And so we do pay attention to those things. We have seen certainly an uptick in tropical systems. And there are two types of tropical systems we're really worried about in North Carolina. One that directly affect the coast, and the other one, which we just had with Hurricane Fred, or Tropical System Fred, that actually rides the spine of the Appalachian Mountains and can do just as much damage to us in western North Carolina. And Martha touched on something. We can have severe flooding here in Mecklenburg County from storms that are over Mecklenburg County, or we can have severe flooding along the Catawba chain, which happens quite frequently. And so we watch, in particular, what happens in Watauga County, what happens in McDowell County, what happens at Lake James, and then we're constantly monitoring how we're able to manage the water all the way down through South Carolina. And so Martha is key to that. We talk a lot. Sometimes we talk late at night. Sometimes we talk early in the morning. The other part of that is we work with the National Weather Service very closely, and we call down there and talk to them and get forecasts. There is a chat room that that emergency management and our National Weather Service gets on, along with our local news meteorologists. So when you get on there, you'll see the Jeff Crumbs and the Brad Panoviches and all the different meteorologists, and then you see all the EM people. And so we all maintain situational awareness through that platform, and it's very helpful for us here in Mecklenburg County.
Yeah, we could call it climate change, we can call, just like Chief Graham said, we can call it whatever it is, but we're preparing for the future, right? And so in the stormwater world, there's two real big things that are driving it, what the future and the variables of the future and the unknowns. One of them is obviously the rain, which could be, variable, increasing, decreasing, things like that. But the other two couple of things is development. We are a growing city, and that water has to go somewhere. And so when our floodplain management program first does the best that we can not to put people in harm's way. That's the best way to avoid a disaster, is not get in the path of the disaster. So we try to keep as much as we can out of the floodplain, as an example. And we're regulating to the future. We've been doing it over almost 25 years now. We were the first in the nation to do it. So that's why we're able to run a floodplain buyout program without having to worry about, and this is a true statistic, for every home that's mitigated, there could be 10 homes added back in the floodplain because they're not regulating to the future. So you would not make an investment where if you're making one stock makes a gain and 10 are losers, that's not a good situation. That's not a good investment scenario, right? So our floodplain buyout program is actually running on those future flood elevations. Not what the flood elevations are now and not what the risk is now, but what the risk is going to be after full development, and we assume greater rainfall rates than what the national average is for our area, or that a calculation suggests for our area. And that's just a continuous investment in that floodplain, in our floodplain maps and our floodplain buyout program to reduce our risk.
And Mr. Phipps, just to piggyback on both of those answers, is just looking at it at a higher level. You know, I think Chief Graham mentioned the relationships that we have in emergency management, also the emergency operations plan. You know, the number of storms or weather events and the severity, obviously, you know, is there. You know, we're not going to debate whether you believe or don't believe in climate change. But I just want you and others to be rest assured that we are more than capable of handling multiple events at one time. And I think we've seen that since my time here between Florence, Michael, RNC, and just on and on and on. We can number a number of events that we just do simultaneously. Just
Right.
because our system, the EOP, our EOC, is made to run that way. Multiple events if necessary. And so I look at it a little bit different, that we are well prepared for that.
Yeah. So EOP, is that Emergency Operation Procedures?
Plan.
Plan?
emergency operations.
So what's COC?
The EOC is the Emergency Operations Center.
Oh, okay.
That's where our coordination and communication, that's the heart right there.
Great. All right. Wow. So, I mean, it's a lot going on. We got a question, and I know we talked about but September 11th is an emergency that we all probably remember more vividly. How are the agencies staying prepared to prevent or respond to terrorist?
You've heard us talk about the Urban Area Security Initiative, right? So the UASI, we're part of what they call the Charlotte UASI, which is a 10-county region, and we work. We get a grant every year. We have since 2001 about $70 million to improve our ability to respond to terrorism, and so that really gets into the Homeland Security portion of it. However, let me say this. It's to deal with floods or cyber or terrorism or pandemics. What we look at is how can we utilize the funds that we receive either from the federal government or through other grants to the best way to deal with all hazards approach. And part of that is we utilize the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System and the training and exercises, the relationships that we have, so that regardless of what the incident is, or regardless of what the event that we're dealing with, we're using the same system, we're using the same equipment, and we're prepared to respond to that. Now, there are always going to be things that it takes time to get organized for. You can only talk to one person at a time, and you've got to get everybody coordinated and moving together, and so call that a battle rhythm. And we saw that last week when we were dealing with the water main break, or if we're dealing with the Colonial Pipeline, or if we're dealing with a pandemic. We've got to get all the right people together and get them talking and coordinated in a way that we're going to be most effective. Terrorism is something that we worry about. It's something that we work to prepare for and be able to respond to. We have our ears to the ground. We've got a lot of, I call it human intelligence out there, whether it's working with CMPD or through social media or through our federal partners or our state partners. And so there's a lot of different people that are involved in that. It's not, I'll say, it takes a lot of time and effort to prepare for these things, but it's not rocket science, right? And so we don't ever want to operate in a silo. And so the most important thing we can do is communicate and share information throughout our different agencies. It's very important. And Chief Johnson, when he was talking about the Emergency Operations Center, what is the EOC? The EOC is there to support operations in the field, but it's also a consolidation of government. It's getting all the right people in the room so that if I need Charlotte Water to handle infrastructure, I need the fire chief to go handle emergency services, or CMPD to handle law enforcement, all the right representatives are there, and I just walk across the room and have that conversation, and everybody knows what's going on. So it maintains that situational awareness. And then we're reporting up to our policy group, which is made up of our county managers, the sheriff, all the key decision makers, And they in turn are briefing our elected officials and making sure that they're in the loop to support us as we move through a major emergency or disaster. So there is a lot to it, and it is something we think about all the time. Everybody in this room loves their jobs, and we all love what we do, and Angela hit on it earlier. There's nothing that we are more proud of than being public servants. And so we take that very seriously.
The only thing I would like to add is that there is constant awareness. Water was deemed critical infrastructure after 911. So we fall up under Homeland Security and some requirements and regulations. And there is awareness, communication, alerts, more than probably the average citizen realizes. So it's more, like I said, it's a lot to that area. But we are definitely plugged in from a security standpoint for our community.
One of the other aspects we look at is working with our private partnerships. One of the roles that a lot of our officers work with, just in the past 2 months, we've done exercises with Bank of America, Amazon, the large shopping centers in the area, the Panthers, where we go through tabletops, an active shooter event simulation, where we're not only prepared, but our large employers in the area, or even the school systems, everyone running through these drills. So like I said, we try to prevent it, or if it does happen, how do we address it and move forward from it? And we've been, and usually when we're talking with these national corporations, in our planning here, Charlotte is looked at it as one of the premier agencies with CFD and CMPD. Like in an active shooter response, CFD is with us, like right at the front, to get the casualties in and out, along with medic. In an instance like that, they trained extensively for it. And when we mentioned how closely we work together on that and the aggressiveness of our plans with that, it beats almost anyone in the nation, and really impresses him that everyone goes into harm's way on that to protect the public.
Thanks for that, bringing up even the private sector is involved in our major employers around the region participating in this whole effort for a holistic approach to disaster preparedness. So I know we've talked, and we got a question here that, this says, what do residents need to know about emergency preparedness in relation to the 2 nuclear power plants? I know we talked about that globally, but and I guess the message that I heard was that is top of mind. That's something that's always, as part of the process, is considered. But I don't know, other than just alerts, and, I just welcome any kind of comments that you can make in regards to that during this particular town hall.
So we could spend hours and hours on this, but what I do want to say is, for McGuire Nuclear Power Station, we have the McGuire Task Force, and so it's made up of over 100 folks. And for Catawba, we have the Catawba Task Force. For McGuire, that includes, I'm going to mess it up, but Cabarrus, Gaston, Lincoln, Catawba, Mecklenburg, obviously, Norcom Emergency Management, Duke Energy, and then a bunch of other folks that are involved in that. And so we meet every month to prepare for that, and then every 2 years we are, and Dave talked about it, we are graded. And so Charlotte Mecklenburg Emergency Management, that's the only time, everything that we do, emergency management is there to support somebody. If it's a nuclear emergency for the off-site emergencies, Charlotte Mecklenburg Emergency Management calls the shots. We're the ones that will say, hey, we're going to evacuate. We're the ones that set off the sirens. We have a whole system in place, and we take it very seriously. There's a lot of people involved, and they do studies on evacuation, how quickly we can evacuate. Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department is key to our ability to clear the lake, and then also to assist with traffic. They run the traffic control points, and their key decision makers train on that. And we are evaluated by FEMA. Fire chief has been in there when we're evaluated by FEMA, and I have the great pleasure of having 2 FEMA evaluators follow me around for 6 hours. They're literally write down every single thing I say. And so all the emergency managers get on a conference call. Now we use WebEx, and we have new technologies, and we talk about what we're going to do, and then we look for consensus, and then we move forward on the consensus. And when we're training, just like in real life, there are 6 emergency operations centers for each county that are open. The state emergency operations center is open. Duke Energy's emergency operations center is open. And we're all talking, we're getting technical assistance from the subject matter experts, but we're the ones making the decisions. The policy group is involved all the way up to your level. Everybody is told, hey, this is what's going on. So it's a very thorough program, and that is as a result of 3 Mile Island going all the way back. And so in the United States, they take I will tell you, they take their nuclear very seriously, and so do we. So.
Wow. Okay, so this is probably the last question coming from the chat. And the question is, how can Charlotte residents become more involved in the emergency planning and preparedness process?
So we have the what they call the All Hazards Advisory Committee, which is led up by the head of it, Patsy Kinsey, who was a former mayor for the city of Charlotte for this year. And so that is a good opportunity for folks from our public to be involved, and they can certainly email us and let us know that they're interested, and we're always there willing to take phone calls and talk about emergency preparedness or discuss it with homeowners associations, et cetera. And we love to hear from our public, so any chance we can to do that. But the AHAC, we call it AHAC, is kind of our not our governing body, but they're our advisory body from the public that really talks to us and lets us know that if we're doing a good job or we're not. So.
Anybody else might want to comment on that question? Has he basically covered it? Okay.
I would say that probably there's a piece of emergency management in every organization in the city, county government, and every one of them dearly appreciates the feedback and engagement of advisory committees. So if somebody has an interest, there's always openings in different advisory committees, such as when you mentioned Chief Graham, that we would love to have the public participation.
Good. So there you have it, folks. I mean, hey, there's ways to participate. Now, I know, Duke Energy, you all had as part of your handouts some energy saving tips for the cooling months or the cooler months. So I think we could probably have that available to the people in the same way that we're going to have the what you do before and after the storm. But yeah, we're coming up on the cooler months, and everything seems to be inching up in terms of cost wise. So this would definitely be coming in handy in these cooler months. So and I'm hoping that this will be helpful to the audience. So that's good. So is anything else that anybody else wants to share before we conclude this meeting? We had it up to a 2-hour event, but most of these town halls are 90 minutes. So I know I wanted to give esteemed representatives here the chance, if we needed any additional time to take it, but if we don't, we can all use a little bit more time in our own personal schedules. And I know it is raining outside, but I don't think it is enough rain to cause us to any kind of concern over the next few hours, I hope. So the fact that we were able to get through this with everybody still standing here gives me comfort, so good. So Oh, that wasn't the last. Okay, we do have one more
Late question.
late question coming in hot off the chat. It says, how are we mitigating flooding hazards now with all the fast development of apartments? Neighborhoods are already seeing an increase of flooding in the North Charlotte area. With storms getting stronger, how can we mitigate the flash flooding concerns? So, yeah, that's top of mind for a lot of people. I mean, how do we do it? I mean,
Yeah, great question. I alluded to this earlier. So back in 2008, actually, Charlotte-Mecklenburg adopted some of the most stringent stormwater regulations in its history. And so we are requiring developers to hold back from a flooding standpoint, and also treat to improve the water quality from the runoff. However, there are some homes and businesses and commercial properties that were built where they shouldn't have been, or the infrastructure is too small, or the infrastructure is just old, and that's where the stormwater program comes in. So I'll say it again: the stormwater program is just continuing to invest in either keeping people out of the floodplain, or moving them out, or making the infrastructure bigger, or making the infrastructure have a new life, last longer, so it doesn't collapse, especially underneath the road. And now we have to close down the road, and now it takes longer to get to school. It takes longer for emergency response services to get to you, things like that. So it's basically taking the stormwater fees that are applied to every property in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and using that revenue and going back and putting into the storm drainage system to make it perform better, as well as regulate new development more stringent than we have in the past. So if you see a stormwater problem, or you're concerned about stormwater, or if you're concerned about a water problem, or just about any service that the city or the county provides, then you can obviously call Charmec 311 by dialing 311. And you can report those problems, and we have multiple agencies, city, county dedicated staff that will respond and try to help the resident as much as we can.
great. All right. Ms. Charles, did you have anything you wanted to say?
The only thing I could think of, Dave, is so correct. We have to develop in a way where we are enhancing and extending the life of the current infrastructure and not going back on the investment. So I think that's important. The other thing I was thinking is about your previous question regarding a citizen wanting to get involved. Please contact, you can also call 311 and contact that particular agency, because I think it is so important that we hear from the public regarding emergency preparedness and any gaps or improvements from the public standpoint, because from a staff standpoint, we do what we plan for what we think the public needs. But to have that two-way conversation and input, I just think would be helpful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, any other closing comments from anyone? And I would just like to thank the Charlotte region and those who have joined us online through this town hall meeting, and definitely want to thank our distinguished panelists, all of whom you've heard tonight that they professed a strong desire and love of public service. Many of whom have, with great sacrifice to their own personal safety and family familiar responsibilities, have gone out and to try to make Charlotte whole in these disaster situations. So, you know, as an elected, appointed official, I mean, I don't think I'll be going out on a limb and answering this question like, are we ready? I would say, from my own personal opinion, you know, with the group that we've had assembled here tonight, that I think we're ready, in as much as other municipalities from all over the country are calling us up, wanting to know, hey, how do y'all do this? What y'all doing? I mean, the accolades that we are getting comes from the dedicated effort and response for these individuals in this room. So I think this is that we should all be proud and looking for ways to even enhance what we're already doing. But I commit to getting these particular post town hall, getting these tips out to you, getting the website addresses that might be of use to a lot of people as we move forward and do our preparations and get ready for the next disaster. And hopefully, that we could have no loss of life and everyone be safe, just following simple instructions, common sense, and just being informed. So, and I want to thank our communications team for the city of Charlotte and in helping to host this, Ms. Wendy Bing and her team. Certainly my council liaison, Ms. Josella Parker, for all the hard work that they put this together in a pretty short amount of time. The city manager's office, truth be told, I was getting kind of saturated with the UDO and 2040 plan. I thought maybe, I think it was probably some time to move to some other areas, so redistricting, so, but I thought that this would be a good topic, and as we still in hurricane season, technically, we got another month to go, and then the winter storm season is coming. So I thought this was a good segue to get us acclimated to disaster preparedness and making sure that we are ready. So with that said, I think we can conclude this town hall. We still got some time off on the schedule here that you all can do other things with. But with that said, I would like to thank everybody. Mr. Burkhoff, who's taken Ms. Donata Jackson's place tonight. Thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for the public for all your questions and interest in this town hall, because I know there's a lot of things going on in Charlotte, and there's a lot of things that you could be doing, a lot of TV shows you could be watching, but you took the time out to watch this town hall, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So with that said, I bid you a fair and fond good evening, and may you enjoy the rest of it. Thank you.